Hello my friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my current little mini obsession. Some of you noticed I go on these little tangents in a sense. You know, it was foiling all the things for a couple videos, and then right now it's this bold leaves background stamp. I just can't stop, won't stop. So after I did my last video using it, and I'll have links at the end of this video, but I did one like a fall themed video with this background stamp, and then I used it in my last video for a Christmas card, and then my brain started going and I was like, oh, Halloween, why not? And I was like, ooh, this would look really nice in black. And I thought about embossing it in black, like either stamping it in black and embossing with clear embossing powder, because black embossing powder, if you have worked with it, you know it is the devil. Knock one container of black embossing powder onto a carpeted floor, you'll understand my PTSD. Anyway, black embossing powder, not fun. But black glitter embossing powder is super fun, super amazing. I've used it in multiple videos. I showed it, during this Halloween series. I've used it multiple times. Love it. Chef's kiss. It's the best stuff ever. So that's what I decided to use. So I have Canson XL watercolor paper. I have the smooth side of this watercolor paper facing up. With the Canson specifically, there's a definite difference, and you can tell immediately what side is the slightly more textured side, what side is the smooth side. Between different brands of watercolor paper, different kinds, all of the things. I would say Canson for a cold press watercolor paper is one of the smoothest. You can do like hot press watercolor paper, which is fully smooth. But okay, I'm not going to get into all the different. There's a bajillion different types of watercolor paper out there. I like my Canson. It's cheap and I'm comfortable with it. So anyway, smooth side up, stamped the background stamp with clear embossing ink. And I use my anti-static powder tool as well to keep the embossing powder from clinging to anything else. There's something about this, but this is Tonic's black. It's glitter noir embossing powder. I don't know. I assume it's the addition of the glitter to the embossing powder. It's not like regular black embossing powder. Again, if you've worked with black embossing powder, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like black embossing powder is like dusty and it wants to get everywhere, and I don't know, we have a mostly like hate of a love-hate relationship with black embossing powder. So anyway, this stuff though is beautiful. Like, I coated this background with that embossing powder, melted it with my heat tool, and honestly I could have called it a day right here. It is so pretty. And then I started thinking, and again, my brain was just like, this would make a beautiful wedding card. You guys know me and my black and gold and white theme. I was like, oh, I almost did that instead of going like a full on Halloween. But I was like, I was determined to Halloween because the idea was in my head. So anyway, after I heat embossed this, I taped this down to a hardboard because I know I was going to use a lot of water and it would like curl up and it would have been a hot mess. So I taped it down to a hardboard with my little Scotch painter's tape. And I'm going to use Distress Reinkers again because I already, I had the colors in my head, everything. So I'm using Villainous Potion, Crackling Campfire, and Rustic Wilderness Distress Reinkers. And like I mentioned in my last video when I used this, I did Distress Reinkers there as well. Reinkers have additives in them that are meant, because they're meant for your ink pads, to re-ink your ink pads. So they do have additives in them to keep your ink pads from drying out. So you'd never want to paint directly with just the reinker with absolutely no water. It's almost never going to dry, because that's the whole point. So you add some water. I did add a lot of water to this before I even added anything, mostly just because I want the color to move. The other thing to note is these three colors, like purple, orange, and green, make mud. Like they don't play well together, So what I'm doing is I'm putting the color down, but I'm not trying to do any blending between the colors. Like, they're naturally going to do their thing because, again, water. And this is a distress product. So, like, They like to play with water, you know? But I am not, you know, going back and forth. And this is one of the things where I knew it was a little easier for me to just stop myself, you know, from moving things around. Because especially something like Crackling Campfire and Villainous Potion, those two colors together make mud. And it does actually make a bit of mud in the end. Not a big deal. You know, so there's a little brown here and there when it's all said and done, but it's fine. But I just wanted to point that out. So you can always let this air dry. Totally fine. This is similar to like when I do like the shimmer backgrounds with the shimmer powders and the water, and it looks like an absolute hot mess when it's like full of liquid, but then it dries completely different. This is the same sort of a thing. It kind of looks like a hot mess, but then as the colors are really dry, it's like, oh. And you could also do this and then stamp, like do a background and then stamp. I prefer stamping first most of the time because I want the colors, like how they pool up around, you know, the heat embossed images. It just gives it a different look. So I super sped this up. I dried this with my heat tool because I'm impatient. And yeah, that's the only reason. I was impatient. So the background is completely dry. And because this background has been heat embossed, I'm using just a dry, like tissue dry paper towel. And I wiped it over the image to pick up any ink that might have been sitting on top of those leaves. In the last video, it was so much easier to see because I had clear heat embossed those leaves so you could see the ink, but this is black. So I made sure to wipe that dry tissue over all of this to pick up any little bits of that ink before I do anything else, because again, these colors are very, very intense and they tend to get everywhere, and I'm klutzy and I'm going to be working with white cardstock. You know, it happens. And I still managed to get, instead of I ended up getting gray ink on the inside of my card because that's just what I do. But anyway, after this background was dry, I cut it down with my paper trimmer, and again, even though I'm going like Halloween, this could have been just any occasion card in my opinion. You know, you could add a thank you sentiment to it. And I don't know, I just, these deep colors and the embossing, and it's just beautiful. But again, I was bound and determined. I wanted to do more Halloween, cards. So why not? So I pulled out the CZ Design Spooky Wafer Dies. And I pulled out also, it wasn't, actually I had it already sitting out. This is the Flaming Orange Glitter cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. I was going to use this on a previous project and I switched gears and did something else, but I had it sitting here and it is such a deep like, oh, it's like, look at it. It's beautiful. So I was determined. I was like, again, I was being stubborn. This just had to do. So I die cut the spooky word from some burnt orange cardstock, and then I topped it with that flaming orange glitter cardstock, and then the outline I die cut from black. And then I took a piece of vellum and I ran that through my little Xyron 3-inch sticker maker. So this is going to put adhesive all over the back of this little piece of vellum. And I just pressed it in really well with my bone folder, just mostly to make sure to pick up any little sticky bits when I remove that little release layer. And then I'm going to die cut this piece of vellum with the adhesive on the back of it with Simon's Friendly Ghosts wafer dies, which I've used in a ton of Halloween videos. This is just one of my favorite, little go-to wafer dies. So because the adhesive is applied on the back of this completely, you won't see it, because with vellum, if you do dots of adhesive, or even there's a couple out there I think that are like claimed to be vellum adhesives. I call BS on all of that. I can still see it. So at least if you completely coat the back of vellum, you can't tell where the adhesive is, because it's everywhere, Plus I love it for something like this, for little ghosts, because it makes the vellum just slightly more transparent, which is perfect for little ghosts. Plus then you can see the detail and the pattern behind them, which just gives it that little extra something. So after I die cut them, peeled the backing off, and then pressed those right onto my background. And then I adhered that spooky word into place with more craft tacky glue. I used my little T-square ruler to get that sentiment straight, because some days I need all the help I can get. So got that adhered. And then I also am using the CZ Design Halloween People stamp set. This is another kind of one of my little go-to Halloween sets, which I think Simon's retiring, which kind of makes me sad. I'll have a link to it. It's still available. It's actually on sale right now too. So as always, links to everything will be in the description box below the video. So my background stamp, I had cleaned it off and I've got it face up on my desk. I decided to use just a gray ink to stamp this on the inside of my card, just a little more neutral, you know, just to give it that little extra something. So I used Simon's Flannel Pawsitively Saturated Ink, and I had Post-it tape masking off at the score line of my note card. And then once I stamped this, I put this back into my MISTI so I could stamp sentiments, also from that Halloween People stamp set. And I'm using the same distress colors, but just in the distress oxide ink pads to stamp the sentiments. So the inside of the card will say, "You are beautiful." So I use the Crackling Campfire, Villainous Potion, and Rustic Wilderness oxide inks to stamp the sentiment, or the Rustic Wilderness and Crackling Campfire for the sentiment, and then for the little ghost from that same set, I used the Villainous Potion. And then I adhered my panel to the card front and completely forgot about this little sentiment from the set I had stamped. I was gonna like film the, you know, take photos of the card, and I was like, wait a minute, something's missing. I was like, oh yeah. I stamped this little tiny sentiment. So the little salutations from the Halloween People I had stamped with that Villainous Potion ink. And I trimmed it down with my paper trimmer. And then I just cut down one tiny little foam square. I cut it in 3 little tiny pieces so that I could adhere this, you know, pop this up with that little bit of foam tape dimension and adhered that into place. Once that's adhered, that's it. I'm not adding any bling. I know, shocking. But it didn't need it. Like, literally. I got the, you know, see-through little bits of vellum, a glittery sentiment. The background is just chef's kiss. You know, the black glitter embossing powder and those colors. You can see the bit of mud I'm talking about, right? The upper middle, right there. You know, that little brown color, but again, it's fine. I'm just, yeah, it is what it is. So this was fun. I paired it with one of Simon's metallic orange peel envelopes just to bring in some more orange and metallic goodness. And that finished off the card. So like I said earlier, I'll have a link below the video to my blog post, links to all the supplies I used. You can check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, commenting. I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.